Asian guy here. I need you to listen very carefully because what I'm about to tell you changes the entire geopolitical chessboard we thought we understood. Something just shifted in the Middle East. Not a missile launch, not a strike, not an invasion, something quieter, something more dangerous. Iran has a new leader, and the moment his name was announced, markets didn't celebrate. They didn't rally, they froze. Because the people who move billions of dollars every single day, the people who price risk for a living, they saw something in this transition that the headlines are refusing to say out loud. They saw the fuse getting shorter. For weeks, we've been told that the situation between Iran and Israel is tense but manageable. We've been told that diplomacy is working. We've been told that cooler heads will prevail. But here's the thing about markets. Markets don't lie. Politicians lie. Media lies. Central banks lie. But markets, when you know how to read them, they tell you the truth before anyone else does. And right now, the bond market, the oil market, the defense sector, they're all screaming the same message. This is not business as usual. This is the setup for something that could spiral completely out of control. Let me paint you the picture of what actually happened. Iran's supreme leader announced a new commander for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Not a diplomat, not a moderate, a hardliner, a man with a very specific resume, a man who built his entire career on one principle: retaliation. His name doesn't matter as much as his philosophy, and his philosophy is simple. Every Israeli action gets an Iranian response. Every sanction gets a countermove. Every threat gets escalation. This is the man who now controls Iran's proxy networks across the region. This is the man who now has operational authority over Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, the militias in Iraq and Syria. This is the man who decides when and where the next strike happens. And Israel knows this. Within 48 hours of the announcement, Israeli defense officials issued a warning. Not a vague statement, not a diplomatic note. A direct operational warning to their military commanders in the north. The message was clear. Prepare for retaliation. Expect escalation. The window for a surprise attack just got smaller. Now, you need to understand what this means in practical terms. When Israel issues a warning like this, it's not posturing. It's not theater. It means their intelligence agencies have picked up chatter. It means they've intercepted communications. It means they've seen movement on the ground that suggests something is being planned. And when you combine that Israeli warning with Iran's new hardline leadership, you get a feedback loop. Iran thinks Israel is about to strike. Israel thinks Iran is about to strike. And in that environment, the side that moves first has the advantage. The side that hesitates gets hit. This is where the markets come in. Because markets are not stupid. Markets are forward-looking machines built to price in future probabilities, and the probability of conflict just went up. Let me show you the evidence. Oil. Brent crude spiked the moment the leadership change was confirmed. Not because of supply disruptions, not because of demand. Because traders know that if Iran and Israel go hot, the Strait of Hormuz becomes a war zone. And if Hormuz shuts down, even for 72 hours, we're talking about 20% of the world's oil supply getting choked off. That means $120 oil. That means $6 gasoline in the United States. That means inflation that the Federal Reserve cannot control with interest rate hikes. Defense stocks, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman. All of them jumped within hours of the news. Why? Because a regional war in the Middle East means weapons consumption on a scale we haven't seen since the Iraq invasion. Missiles get fired, jets get scrambled, drones get shot down, and all of that hardware has to be replaced. The defense contractors know this. Their analysts ran the scenarios the second Iran's new leader was named, and they started buying. But here's the part that should terrify you: the bond market. U.S. Treasuries, which are supposed to be the safest asset in the world, started acting strange. Yields ticked up, not because of inflation data, not because of Fed policy, because bond traders are pricing in the risk that the United States gets pulled into this conflict. And if the U.S. gets pulled in, that means emergency defense spending. That means the national debt, which is already at $36 trillion, jumps even higher. That means the dollar's reserve status comes under pressure. That means the entire financial system has to reprice risk. So let's go deeper. Let's talk about why this leadership change is not just a political shuffle. Let's talk about why this specific man, in this specific role, at this specific moment, creates a domino effect that could reshape global power. Iran has been playing a very careful game for the last 2 years. After the protests, after the hijab crackdown, after the economic sanctions tightened, they've been trying to avoid direct confrontation with Israel. They've been using their proxies to do the dirty work. Hezbollah fires rockets from Lebanon. The Houthis attack shipping in the Red Sea. Iraqi militias strike U.S. bases. Iran gets plausible deniability. They get to hurt their enemies without taking the blame. But that strategy requires restraint. It requires a leadership that knows when to pull back. It requires someone who understands that going too far invites a devastating Israeli counterstrike. The new leader is not that person. His entire career has been built on the opposite philosophy. He believes that restraint is weakness. He believes that Iran's proxies should be unleashed, not leashed. He believes that Israel's strikes on Iranian targets in Syria, in Lebanon, in Gaza, all of those have gone unanswered for too long. And he has the authority to change that. This is not speculation. This is what he has said publicly, in speeches to the Revolutionary Guard, in statements to Iranian media. He's made it clear that the rules of engagement are about to shift. And when the rules of engagement shift in a region as volatile as the Middle East, you don't get a gradual adjustment. You get a sudden, violent recalibration. Israel sees this. They have to see this. Their entire defense doctrine is based on preemption. If they believe that Iran is about to greenlight a massive proxy attack, or worse, a direct strike from Iranian territory, they will not wait. They will hit first, and they will hit hard. The question is not if, the question is when, and the question is what happens next. Because if Israel strikes Iranian nuclear facilities, or Iranian military command centers, or Iranian oil infrastructure, Iran will respond. Not with a statement, not with a UN complaint, with missiles, with drones, with cyber attacks, and that response will force the United States to make a decision. Do we back Israel fully and risk getting dragged into a regional war? Or do we try to stay neutral and risk looking weak to our allies and our adversaries? Either path has catastrophic consequences. If we back Israel, we're at war with Iran. And a war with Iran means Hormuz closes. It means oil shocks. It means a global recession. It means China and Russia see an opening to make moves while we're distracted. If we stay neutral, we lose credibility. We lose the Middle East. We lose the petrodollar system that has propped up American hegemony for 50 years. The markets are pricing this in right now. The volatility index, the VIX, has been creeping higher. Not spiking, creeping. Because smart money doesn't panic. Smart money quietly repositions. They sell equities in sectors that get crushed during war. Airlines, tourism, consumer discretionary. They buy defense. They buy energy. They buy gold. And they hedge with options that pay out if the S&P 500 drops 20% in a month. This is the positioning of people who know something bad is coming but don't know the exact date. Let me give you the timeline that keeps me up at night. Iran's new leader takes full operational control in the next 2 weeks. That's when he gets briefed on all active operations. That's when he gets the authority to approve new strikes. That's when the proxy networks start receiving updated orders. Israel's intelligence will pick up on this activity. They will see the shift. And they will have a narrow window to act before Iran's posture hardens. My estimate is that we are 30 to 45 days away from a critical decision point. Either Israel strikes preemptively, or Iran greenlights a coordinated proxy assault that forces Israel's hand. And here's the part that no one is talking about: the nuclear clock. Iran is closer to a bomb than they have ever been. The IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, has confirmed that Iran has enriched uranium to 60% purity. Weapons grade is 90%. The gap between 60% and 90% is not a matter of years. It's a matter of months, maybe weeks, if they decide to sprint. Israel has said repeatedly that they will not allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. That red line has been stated by every Israeli prime minister for the last 20 years. So if Iran's new hardline leader decides to accelerate the nuclear program as a deterrent, as a bargaining chip, as a weapon, Israel will have no choice but to strike. And a strike on Iran's nuclear facilities is not a surgical operation. It's a multi-day air campaign. It's bunker busters hitting underground sites in Natanz and Fordo and Isfahan. It's accepting that some of those sites are too deep to destroy completely. It's accepting that Iran will retaliate with everything they have. And it's accepting that the entire region goes up in flames. And this is why the markets are reacting. Because the people who run the models, who price the derivatives, who manage the sovereign wealth funds, they understand game theory. They understand that once you put two players in a room where both believe the other is about to attack, and both have the capability to strike first, the rational move is to strike first. It's the prisoner's dilemma on a geopolitical scale. And the tragic part is that even if neither side actually wants war, even if both sides would prefer to avoid it, the logic of preemption makes war almost inevitable. So what happens to your money if this goes hot? What happens to your portfolio if we wake up one morning and CNN is showing footage of Tel Aviv under missile attack? Let me walk you through the cascade. Oil spikes to $100 within hours, maybe $120 if Hormuz gets mined or blocked. That means every sector that depends on transportation, on logistics, on fuel gets crushed. Airlines lose 30% in a day. Shipping companies pause operations. Trucking costs explode. Inflation, which central banks thought they had under control, roars back. The Fed has to choose between raising rates to fight inflation or cutting rates to prevent a recession. Either choice breaks something. Equities sell off. The S&P drops 10% to 15% in the first week. Not because companies are going bankrupt, but because risk-off sentiment takes over. Investors flee to safety, bonds, gold, the dollar. And this is where it gets interesting. Gold doesn't just go up. Gold explodes. We're talking $3,000 an ounce, maybe $3,500. Because in a world where the Middle East is on fire, where oil is spiking, where inflation is back, where central banks are trapped, gold becomes the only asset that makes sense. It's the only thing that isn't someone else's liability. It's the only thing that can't be printed or sanctioned or frozen. But here's the darker scenario. What if this conflict doesn't stay regional? What if China sees the US distracted, bogged down in the Middle East, and decides this is the moment to move on Taiwan? What if Russia, seeing NATO focused on supporting Israel, escalates in Ukraine? What if the world realizes that the American security umbrella, the Pax Americana that has kept global trade flowing for 80 years, is overstretched and underfunded? That's when the real collapse begins. That's when the dollar loses its reserve status. That's when countries start dumping treasuries. That's when the financial system that we've taken for granted for our entire lives simply stops working. I know this sounds extreme. I know it sounds like fear-mongering. But I'm not making this up. I'm reading the same signals that the professionals are reading. The bond traders, the oil analysts, the defense contractors, the intelligence community. They're all preparing for a scenario that most people think is impossible. And the reason they're preparing is because the mathematics of conflict escalation, once you cross certain thresholds, become almost deterministic. You can predict the outcome with the same certainty that you can predict a chemical reaction. Iran's new leader is a catalyst. He's the spark in a room full of gasoline. And Israel's warning is the acknowledgement that they smell the fumes. The markets are reacting because they understand chemistry. They understand that once you introduce heat to a volatile system, you don't get a slow burn. You get an explosion. And the explosion doesn't care about your portfolio. It doesn't care about your retirement account. It doesn't care about your plans for the future. It consumes everything in its path and leaves a new reality in its wake. So here's what you do. You stop pretending that this is just another news cycle. You stop assuming that cooler heads will prevail. You start positioning for a world where the Middle East goes critical. You hold physical assets. You reduce exposure to sectors that collapse during war. You hedge with options. You keep cash on hand because liquidity dries up when panic sets. And most importantly, you pay attention. Because the next few weeks will determine whether this is a close call or the beginning of something that changes everything. The warning has been issued. The markets have reacted. The clock is running. Stay alert.